Usually on the fourth Thursday of the month, I tell you about a memoir or a writing book I liked and found very helpful. Today I'm going to veer from that path just a bit. My topic will ultimately introduce you to a lot of new memoirs and just possibly help you write your own life stories as well. Hi, my name is Patricia Charpentier and welcome to episode 97 of the Life Writers Vlog, where you can find inspiration and useful tips to help you write your life stories. Today I want to tell you about a podcast I really love. I listen to a lot of podcasts when I'm in the car. I'm not a fan of listening to music and radio stations and whatnot when I drive. The news is upsetting and depressing for the most part. So a couple of years ago, I got into listening to podcasts. I first listened to a health guru podcast for a while, and then I got afraid to eat anything. I listened to a meditation, a wisdom teacher for a year or so. Then I'm not sure how I landed on this podcast called Let's Talk Memoir, hosted by Ronit Plank. Let's Talk Memoir, hosted by Ronit Plank. This podcast has been a goldmine for me in so many ways, and I wanted to share it with you. Plank brings in mostly memoirists who have written on all topics. Sometimes she interviews agents or publishers or editors. She brings people on who are entrenched in the world of memoir. I love this podcast. I was late in discovering it, so I have more than 100 back episodes to listen to now. Let me tell you why I love this podcast and why I'm going to recommend it to you as well. First, Ronit Plank is an excellent interviewer and asks questions I want to hear the answers to. She is a memoirist herself, the author of When She Comes Back, published in 2021. I haven't read it yet, but I bought it and it's on my list, probably next in line. Another thing I love is that she brings on real writers, not celebrities, 80% of whom had ghostwriters write their books. Believe me, I have nothing against ghostwriters. I have ghostwritten many books for people who didn't or couldn't write their stories themselves. But my friends tell me I'm a snob about what I read, and I am. I only like to read memoirs written by good writers who have interesting stories to tell, who tell them in a really interesting way. I'm not that interested in the lives of the rich and famous and what they did to get that way. Another aspect of Let's Talk Memoir I love is that Plank doesn't assume her listeners know the authors she interviews or their books. Her first question is always, for those who have not yet seen your book, can you share a bit about what it covers and what the story is about? Right from the start, I know what this author is talking about. My favorite parts of each episode come at the end. In each interview, she asks what books helped the authors write their stories. They usually name off 4 or 5 books, which she ultimately lists in the show notes of each episode. I've read quite a few of the ones they mentioned, but I have been introduced to a wealth of new memoirs I probably would not have heard of otherwise. The number of memoir samples I have on my Kindle right now is huge because of that. But I feel rich knowing I have all of those memoirs to try out. Another thing I like is at the end of the podcast, Plank asked the author for any advice or help he or she would like to give other people writing their memoirs. and they always give heartfelt, useful, and encouraging advice. By now, you can probably tell how much I like this podcast. I encourage you to check it out yourself and let me know what you think. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. You can access it on most podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, or a host of others, most of which do not charge subscription fees to listen to podcasts. You can also listen to it on Plank's website, and I included a link to her site in this vlog's description. Tell me about your experience with podcasts. Are you a podcast listener? If so, what kinds of podcasts do you like to listen to? Do you follow any writing-related podcasts we might also enjoy? If you're not a podcast fan, what do you dislike? What is your favorite way to learn more about memoirs and memoir writing? Tell us about your experience with or without podcasts down in the comments section below. But remember, whether you like them or hate them, the only way to do this wrong is to not do it at all. The only way to do this wrong is to not do it at all. Until next time, happy writing, everybody.
Don't miss the next episode. Sign up to be notified of future posts and upcoming events. Use the buttons below to share this episode on social media or with a friend who might like it. If you enjoyed this week's episode, you will love our Life Writers membership. Whether you don't know where to start writing your life stories, have started and stopped many times, or have been writing but want to receive feedback to make your stories better, the Life Writers membership is where you need to be. We have a Get Started roadmap, an extensive library of instructional videos, live events via Zoom, and a supportive and active community. If you want to take the stories that live in your heart and mind and put them into words on the page, check out Life Writers at lifewriters.us.